Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. It all started with a message sent to the wrong number. Late at night, under the dim light of her tiny apartment, Lena stared at her phone, her thumb hovering over the screen. Her heart still ached from the breakup she had never truly processed. She typed the words she once wished she had said in person, "I still believe in you." Then she hit send. But it was not her ex-boyfriend's number. On the other side of the city, in a glass tower overlooking downtown Chicago, Ethan Cole sat in his office, the CEO of a media empire built on appearances and power. His tie hung loose, his face pale under the blue glow of the monitor. A single message popped up on his phone, words from an unknown number that felt strangely personal. "I still believe in you." He stared at it for a long time. No one had said those words to him in years. Outside, the city buzzed with distant sirens and sleepless ambition, but inside, Ethan was surrounded by silence and scandal. Earlier that day, his fiancée had ended their engagement in public, right before a crucial shareholders' meeting. The tabloids were tearing him apart, and his board was threatening to replace him. He leaned back, exhaling a bitter laugh. "Maybe the universe has a sense of humor," he muttered. He replied, "You might regret believing in me." On her end, Lena blinked in confusion. The number was not her ex's, but something about the reply made her curious. "Who is this?" she typed. The response came quickly, "Maybe someone who just got a second chance." She almost deleted the chat, but the name unknown lingered on her screen, glowing faintly in the dark. The next morning, while Lena brewed instant coffee in her small kitchen, an email notification arrived. Subject line, "Proposal for collaboration." She frowned. The sender's name, Ethan Cole. The man behind Cole Media, the same one trending on every headline for a broken engagement. The message was short, professional, but oddly direct. "Miss Lena Hart, I have a business proposition. Meet me at Cole Tower, 10 a.m. sharp." She thought it had to be spam until she noticed her own words quoted beneath his signature. "I still believe in you." Confused but intrigued, she went. When she stepped into the towering marble lobby, her sneakers squeaked against the polished floor. Assistants rushed by in heels and suits, glancing at her with the kind of polite curiosity reserved for people who clearly did not belong. At the top floor, the elevator opened to a room of glass and steel. Ethan stood by the window, his reflection merging with the skyline. He turned, his voice calm, smooth, almost rehearsed. "Miss Hart, thank you for coming. I believe you sent me a message last night." She blushed, stammering, "That was a mistake, Mr. Cole. I meant to text someone else." "A mistake," he echoed, walking closer. "Funny how mistakes tend to find us when we need them most." He slid a folder across the table. Inside was a contract. She frowned, flipping through the pages. "What is this?" He met her eyes. "A proposal. I need a fiancé for 90 days. Lena's jaw dropped. "Excuse me?" Ethan folded his hands. "My company is bleeding from a broken engagement scandal. Investors want stability. I need someone authentic, someone the public can trust. You, Miss Hart, are ordinary. And that is exactly what I need." She laughed, thinking it was a joke. "You do not even know me." "On the contrary," he said softly, "I know you believe in people. That makes you perfect." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "You help me save my company, and I will pay off your debts. $150,000. No strings. Just a contract." Lena's breath caught. "Why me?" "Because," he said, with a faint smile, "you texted first. The city hummed below, and in that suspended moment, two strangers stared at each other, one drowning in loneliness, the other desperate for escape. Neither of them knew that a single message sent to the wrong number was about to turn into a marriage that would test everything they thought they knew about love, loyalty, and truth. For a long moment, Lena could not speak. The words, fake fiancé, echoed in her mind like an absurd joke that somehow felt real. Ethan Cole's gaze never wavered. He was calm, controlled, the kind of man used to getting what he wanted. The silence between them felt heavier than the glass walls around his office. Finally, Lena found her voice. "You want me to pretend to be engaged to you?" she asked quietly. "Why me? You could hire an actress, a model, anyone." Ethan's tone was steady. "Because people can tell when something is fake. I do not need perfection. I need authenticity. You are ordinary, and that is exactly what the public trusts. You are the person who sent a message believing in someone you did not even know. That kind of sincerity cannot be bought." Lena shook her head, half laughing in disbelief. "You are asking a stranger to marry you for money." "I am asking you to help me save hundreds of jobs," Ethan replied. "My company is collapsing under rumors. If the media sees stability, if investors believe I am moving forward, everything changes. 90 days. Then we end the agreement." He slid a pen toward her. "You walk away debt-free." She stared at the contract, the neat black letters swimming before her eyes. Her mind flashed to the overdue bills on her mother's hospital table, the eviction notice taped to her door, the hopelessness that had clung to her for months. "3 rules," Ethan continued, his voice low but firm. "Rule 1: this is not real. You will not fall in love with me. Rule 2: you will follow my lead in public. Rule 3: you will not leave before the final gala." His words were precise, cold, like lines carved in stone. Lena exhaled slowly. "And if I say no?" Ethan looked at her for a long time, then said simply, "Then I will find someone else, and you will still lose your home." The honesty in his cruelty made her chest tighten. He was not threatening her, he was offering her a way out. A dangerous, humiliating, impossible way out. "Still," she signed. The pen felt heavier than it should have. When she placed it down, Ethan extended his hand. "Welcome to the arrangement." His palm was warm, steady, and for a brief second she saw something flicker behind his composure, a trace of exhaustion, maybe regret. That night, Lena moved into the penthouse on the 42nd floor of Cole Tower. Everything gleamed: glass, marble, and silver. She had never seen a place so silent. There were no family photos, no warmth, only space and precision. A housekeeper handed her a scheduled breakfast at 7, press coaching at 9, etiquette training at noon. Lena barely slept. Every tick of the clock felt like a countdown to something she could not name. The next morning, Ethan appeared in the kitchen, dressed in a charcoal suit. He poured 2 cups of coffee, sliding one toward her. "You take it black," he said, not asking, just knowing. "You read my file," she replied. "Of course," he said simply. She hesitated, then took a sip. It was strong, bitter, exactly like the man who made it. As the week passed, she found herself caught in a whirlwind of preparation. A stylist adjusted her posture, a PR coach taught her how to smile under pressure, and Ethan's personal assistant drilled her on his biography, down to the name of his childhood dog. Lena tried to absorb it all, but every time she caught Ethan watching her from across a room, she felt the strange sense that he was memorizing her too. One evening, she stood before a mirror in a sleek dress chosen for their first public appearance together. Ethan entered, adjusting his cufflinks. For a second, neither spoke. Then he said quietly, "You look convincing." She managed a small smile. "That is the nicest thing you have said to me." He smirked faintly. "Do not get used to it." In the car on the way to the gala, Lena gazed out the window at the blur of city lights. "Why me, really?" she asked softly. Ethan turned his head, his reflection sharp in the tinted glass. Because when everything else feels calculated, you are the only thing that does not. His words lingered in the air long after they stepped onto the red carpet, hand in hand, cameras flashing like a storm around them. To the world, they were the perfect couple. But behind every practiced smile, both of them knew the truth: this was not love. It was a contract signed in desperation. Yet deep inside, something unspoken had already begun to stir, fragile and dangerous, like the first crack in a wall built too high for too long. The gala was everything Lena had feared and more. Chandeliers glimmered like frozen stars above a sea of silk and champagne. Cameras flashed as reporters called their names, and Ethan's hand rested lightly on her back, steady and rehearsed. He smiled for the crowd, the picture of composure, while Lena's heart thudded behind her practiced smile. Every laugh, every handshake, every whispered compliment felt like a performance. "Remember, stay close to me," Ethan murmured through the corner of his smile as a photographer shouted their names. "We are selling a story tonight." "A story," she whispered back. "I just hope it has a happy ending." Inside, the ballroom pulsed with the quiet hum of money and ego. Lena recognized faces from magazines and television screens, people who could change lives with a single call. As they approached the table reserved for investors, a reporter intercepted them, voice sharp with curiosity. "Mr. Cole, how does it feel to move on so quickly after your last engagement?" The question sliced through the air. For a moment Ethan's smile faltered, but before he could respond, Lena stepped forward. "It feels human," she said clearly. "We all fall. The difference is that he stood up again." A ripple of murmurs swept through the crowd. Ethan's gaze flicked toward her, surprise flickering in his eyes before he turned back to the reporter. "Exactly," he said smoothly. "And I am lucky to have someone who understands that." Cameras clicked, capturing the moment. For the first time, Ethan's public image shifted from scandal to redemption, all because of her. Later that night, after the last glass of champagne had been poured and the lights had dimmed, they returned to the penthouse. Lena kicked off her heels, sinking into the sofa with a tired laugh. "I think I just survived a battlefield." Ethan loosened his tie, watching her. "You were remarkable." "I did not embarrass you, then," she teased. "Quite the opposite. You saved the night." He paused, then added, "Thank you." It was the first genuine thing he had said since they met. Lena looked up at him, surprised by the softness in his tone. For a moment, the wall between them cracked. But just as quickly, he straightened his posture, his expression hardening again. "Do not let it go to your head," he said, walking toward his office. She smiled faintly to herself. The next weeks blurred into routine. Photo shoots, interviews, and public appearances filled their days. The more they pretended, the more natural it began to feel. Lena found herself laughing at Ethan's dry humor, noticing the way he always brought her coffee before meetings, the way his shoulders relaxed when they were alone. He was still guarded, but there were glimpses of a man beneath the armor, a man who carried too many expectations and not enough peace. One rainy evening, she found him on the balcony, staring at the city lights below. "You should sleep," she said softly. "You have another meeting at 7. "I cannot," he admitted. "The noise in my head does not stop when the day ends." She hesitated, then stepped closer. "You built something incredible, Ethan. You just forgot to live in it." He glanced at her, the rain reflecting in his eyes like shards of light. "You talk like you know me." "Maybe I do," she said quietly. "You are not as unreadable as you think." He smiled, faint and tired. "Careful." That almost sounded like rule-breaking. She folded her arms, smiling back. Maybe some rules deserve to be broken. The next morning, their faces were on every magazine cover, headlines declaring Ethan Cole's new love brings hope to Cole Media. Investors returned, and the company began to recover. Yet behind the glossy photos, Ethan felt a tension he could not name. One night, during a late strategy meeting, his assistant mentioned something about Lena's unpaid debts being cleared ahead of schedule. Ethan frowned. By whose order? Yours, sir, the assistant said. You approved the transfer. Ethan did not remember doing that. He realized then that somewhere between the signatures and the smiles, he had started caring without meaning to. As for Lena, she began to sense it too, the unspoken warmth that lingered after every public performance, the way his gaze softened when she laughed. But both of them were bound by the same piece of paper, the same rules they swore to keep. 90 days, no love, no lies. Still, as the days slipped away, they could no longer tell where the contract ended and the feelings began. And neither of them was ready to admit that what started as a mistake might already be turning into something real. As weeks turned into a month, the lines between the contract and reality continued to blur. Lena and Ethan had settled into a rhythm that neither of them dared to define. Publicly, they were flawless. Every photo captured smiles that looked effortless, every interview painted them as the couple that rebuilt faith and love. But behind closed doors, the silence between them was charged with something neither of them could name. One morning, Lena woke to find Ethan already in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, stirring sugar into 2 mugs of coffee. I thought you had a meeting at 7, she said, her voice still soft from sleep. It was cancelled, he replied. Sit. You need to eat something before your fitting. She sat across from him, watching the steam rise between them. The warmth of it felt almost like a conversation. You do not have to take care of me, she said quietly. Ethan's gaze lifted to meet hers. Maybe I want to. For a brief second, neither looked away. Something shifted, fragile but undeniable. Then the spell broke as his phone buzzed, slicing through the quiet. He stood quickly, mask back in place. I have to take this, he said, already walking away. Lena watched him disappear into his office, her heart pounding. That afternoon, during a photo session for a charity event, a stylist adjusted her dress and whispered, "You two make quite the pair. You can always tell when it is real." The words made Lena smile, but it also stung. Because it was not real. Not yet. The event that evening was smaller than their first gala, but far more intimate, a fundraiser for a youth literacy foundation that Cole Media sponsored. As they arrived, hand in hand, flashbulbs flickered again. Ethan's demeanor was calm, but Lena could feel his tension in the way his fingers tightened slightly around hers. At the dinner table, surrounded by board members and journalists, a man with a sharp smile leaned toward her. So tell us, Miss Hart, how did a woman like you end up capturing Ethan Cole's heart? The question drew laughter, but it was laced with curiosity, even doubt. Lena felt her pulse quicken, but before she could answer, Ethan placed his hand over hers. By being honest, he said simply. That is something the rest of us forget how to do. The table went quiet. The sincerity in his tone caught even Lena off guard. After dinner, while music played softly in the background, Ethan led her to the balcony overlooking the glowing city. The air was cool, scented with rain and champagne. You handled yourself well tonight, he said. So did you, she replied. You almost sounded sincere in there. Maybe I was, he said, turning toward her. For the first time, he looked vulnerable, stripped of all the polish and power. This life, he said, gesturing toward the glittering skyline, it looks beautiful from the outside, but it is lonely. You forget how to be seen for who you really are. Lena looked at him, her voice barely above a whisper. Maybe you just needed the right person to remind you. He took a step closer. And who would that be? I think you already know, she said softly. The space between them disappeared. The city lights flickered like stars as Ethan's hand brushed her cheek, tentative, questioning. But before anything more could happen, his phone rang again. He cursed under his breath and stepped back. It is the board, he said, his tone suddenly clipped. They are nervous about the merger. The warmth in the air vanished. He turned away to take the call, his voice sharp, professional, untouchable once more. Lena stood there, staring at the skyline, realizing that for all the progress they had made, Ethan still lived behind a wall. Later that night, when she returned to her room, she found a small note on her nightstand. In neat handwriting, it read, "I wanted to finish that conversation. I am sorry." She smiled faintly, folding the paper and tucking it into her journal. The next morning, the tabloids had a new headline: Ethan Cole's fiancée wins the city's heart. The photographs captured every moment of tenderness between them, but none of the distance that still remained. As she sipped her coffee, Lena wondered if anyone else could see the truth that their love story was built on borrowed time. She did not know that before the contract was over, fate would test whether that time could become something real. The following weeks moved like a slow current, calm on the surface but full of tension underneath. The headlines were kind to them now. Ethan Cole and his fiancée were the city's new fascination, a redemption story wrapped in expensive suits and elegant gowns. Yet, behind every flash of the camera, there were moments that no one else could see. Lena had begun to notice the small things about him: the way he loosened his tie the moment they got into the car, how he always ordered her favorite tea without asking, how his smile softened when she laughed. But she also noticed the shadows that never left his eyes. One late evening, after a long day of meetings, Ethan came home later than usual. His shoulders were tense, and his expression unreadable. "You are still awake," he said as he set down his briefcase. "Could not sleep," she replied. "You look like you could use a break." He sat beside her on the couch, silent for a long time. Then he said, "We closed the merger today. The company is stable again." "That is good news," she said, smiling. "Is it?" he asked quietly. "I thought saving it would make me feel something. Relief. Pride. Anything. But it feels hollow." She studied him for a moment. "Maybe it is because you saved a company, not yourself." He turned toward her, the weight in his eyes undeniable. "And what about you, Lena? What are you saving?" She hesitated, then said softly, "Maybe the part of me that still believes in happy endings." The silence stretched between them, but this time it was not uncomfortable. It was fragile, full of understanding. For the first time, Ethan looked at her not as a contract, but as a person. The next evening, they attended a charity dinner. Everything was going smoothly until Ethan's former fiancée, Miranda, appeared. Her smile was poised, but her eyes gleamed with quiet malice. "Ethan," she purred, approaching them, "it has been a while. And this must be the woman who replaced me." Lena forced a polite smile, extending her hand. "Lena Hart." Miranda took it, her grip too firm. "How charming," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. "Tell me, Lena, how does it feel to play fiancé to a man still haunted by his last love?" Ethan's jaw tightened, but before he could intervene, Lena spoke calmly. "It feels like standing beside a man who learns from his mistakes. Something I hope we all do." The crowd around them murmured, impressed by her composure. Miranda's smile faltered, and she excused herself under the weight of her own embarrassment. When she was gone, Ethan turned to Lena, his expression a mix of surprise and admiration. "You did not have to defend me," he said. "Yes, I did," she replied. "Because whether this is real or not, I will not let anyone treat you like you are something broken." His eyes softened, and for a moment, he reached out as if to touch her hand but stopped himself. That night, after the event, they rode home in silence. The city lights flickered past the car windows, painting gold reflections across her face. When they reached the penthouse, Ethan stopped her before she could walk away. "Lena," he said quietly, "about earlier, thank you." She turned, her voice barely a whisper. "Do not thank me. Just mean it when you smile next time." The words hit deeper than she intended. Ethan nodded, and for the first time, he did smile, small, genuine, almost shy. As the days passed, something changed. Their interactions grew less scripted, their laughter more real. Even the staff began to notice. One morning, the housekeeper found Ethan in the kitchen making pancakes, badly. For her, he explained, as if he needed a reason. But nothing about it felt like obligation anymore. That evening, Lena returned from a volunteer project and found the dining table set with candles and mismatched dishes. "This looks," she began, at a loss for words. "Dangerous," Ethan finished, smiling awkwardly. "But I thought I would try." She laughed, sitting down. The pancakes were uneven, the tablecloth slightly burned at one corner, but it was the most beautiful thing she had seen in months. "You are impossible," she said, still laughing. "And yet," he replied, "you are still here." The sound of her laughter faded into the hum of the city outside. Neither of them said it out loud, but both knew the truth: the contract was no longer pretending. Something real had begun to take its place. And deep down, they were both terrified of what that meant. The morning after the dinner, sunlight poured through the penthouse windows, gentle and golden. Lena stood on the balcony, coffee in hand, watching the city below come alive. Behind her, Ethan appeared, still in his white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. For once, his phone was nowhere in sight. "You are awake early," she said, glancing back at him. "Could not sleep," he admitted. "Too much on my mind." "Work again?" she asked softly. "Something like that," he said, leaning against the railing beside her. "You ever think about what happens when all of this ends?" The question caught her off guard. "The contract?" "Yes," he said quietly. "When it is over, you will leave. The cameras will move on, the world will forget. And I will still be here." Lena looked at him for a long time before saying, "Maybe you are not supposed to stay in the same place forever." He turned to her, the morning light catching in his eyes. "What if the place starts to feel like home?" She smiled faintly. "Then maybe it already is." The air between them thickened with everything left unsaid. He reached for her hand, hesitated, then finally took it. For the first time since the contract began, the touch did not feel like part of a performance. It felt human, fragile, real. Later that week, Ethan surprised her by suggesting they visit the Foundation's new literacy center. The cameras were not invited. When they arrived, the building was filled with laughter, books, and the quiet energy of people who still believed in change. Lena watched as Ethan knelt to speak with an elderly volunteer, his face open, his voice warm. It was the first time she had seen him without the weight of his public persona. "You are good at this," she told him as they walked through the hallway lined with hand-painted murals. "Good at what?" "Being a person," she said with a small smile. He laughed softly. "I am still learning." "So am I," she replied. That evening, back at the penthouse, rain began to fall against the windows. They shared dinner, simple and quiet. Ethan set his fork down. "Do you ever wonder," he said, "if we would have met without that text?" "Probably not," Lena said. "We live in different worlds." "And yet," he said, "one wrong number brought you into mine." His voice lowered. "I do not want this to be temporary anymore." Her heart skipped. "Ethan," he reached across the table, his tone raw now. "I know what I said at the beginning. No feelings. No lines crossed. But I cannot keep pretending this is just business." The storm outside mirrored the chaos inside her chest. "You are breaking your own rule," she whispered. "Maybe the rule was wrong," he said. "Maybe I was wrong." She wanted to believe him. Every part of her did. But before she could answer, his phone buzzed on the counter. He hesitated, then picked it up. The color drained from his face. "What is it?" she asked. "It is nothing," he said quickly, ending the call. But she saw the flicker of panic behind his calm mask. "Ethan, what is going on?" "Just a misunderstanding," he said, already walking toward his study. "Go to bed, Lena." She did not. Later, unable to sleep, she found him still awake, staring at his laptop, the glow reflecting the words of a headline. Her heart sank. The news article showed a leaked document titled "Contractual Relationship Between Ethan Cole and Lena Hart." Photos, signatures, everything. Oh my God, she whispered. Ethan looked up, his expression grim. Someone leaked it. Who? She demanded. Does it matter? He said bitterly. The damage is done. Lena's pulse raced. The board, the investors, they will think everything was a lie. He exhaled sharply. It was supposed to protect the company, not destroy it. She took a step closer. We can fix this. How? He snapped. By smiling for another photo? By pretending this is still real? His words hit her like a slap. So that is what this was to you? Pretending, she said, her voice trembling. Lena, he said, softer now, that is not what I meant. Then what did you mean? She asked. Silence. He had no answer. Without another word, she turned and walked toward the elevator. The rain outside blurred the city into silver streaks as the doors closed between them. In the quiet that followed, Ethan stood alone in the penthouse, realizing that the very lie he had created to save his empire had just cost him the only truth he had left. The story broke by morning. Every media outlet carried the same headline, the same photographs, the same betrayal. Cole Media's engagement was a contract. The world that had once adored them now turned cruel. Reporters camped outside the building, investors demanded answers, and Ethan Cole's name trended for all the wrong reasons. Inside the penthouse, the silence was deafening. The coffee pot sat untouched, the papers scattered across the table. Ethan had not slept. Every word of the article felt like a blade, each one cutting deeper. He had built an empire on control, but now everything was unraveling. Down in a modest apartment across town, Lena packed her few belongings into a suitcase. The noise from the city seeped through the walls, but she barely heard it. The article had exposed everything, including her. Strangers online called her a liar, a gold digger, a fraud. She had never cared about fame or money, but the thought of being nothing more than a scandal in his story broke her. Her phone vibrated with messages from numbers she did not recognize. She ignored them all. When she finally sat down, she saw the note Ethan had left her weeks ago, the one that said, "I wanted to finish that conversation." She folded it carefully and placed it in her bag before walking out the door. Back at Cole Tower, the boardroom was a battlefield. "You destroyed the company's credibility," one executive hissed. "You lied to the public." Ethan stood at the head of the table, his tie loosened, his voice steady but cold. "I lied to protect this company. I will not lie again." "Then fix it," another snapped. "Or step down." Ethan looked out the window at the rain-soaked skyline. His reflection stared back, tired, worn, human. "I will fix it," he said quietly. But he knew the only way to do that was to tell the truth. That evening, while the world speculated and accused, Ethan drafted a public statement. Every word came from somewhere deeper than pride. What began as an arrangement became something real. The only mistake I made was pretending it was not. When it was done, he posted it himself and turned off his phone. Then he did something he had not done in years. She left the office with no destination. The city was cold, the air sharp with rain. He walked for blocks until he found himself in front of a small bookstore, the same one where he had first seen Lena months ago. Through the window, he saw her inside, rearranging books on a shelf, her hair falling loose around her face. For a moment, he just watched her, the noise of the street fading into nothing. She looked peaceful, almost like the life she had before him. He stepped inside. The bell over the door chimed, and Lena froze. When she turned and saw him, her breath caught. "Ethan," she whispered. He stood a few feet away, drenched from the rain, his voice low. "I am sorry." She shook her head. "It is too late. The world already decided who I am." "Then let me remind them," he said. "You were never a lie, Lena. You were the only truth in all of it." She wanted to believe him, but her heart was still too raw. "You cannot fix this with words," she said quietly. "I know," he replied. That is why I am not asking for forgiveness. I am asking for a chance to make things right. And with that, he walked out before she could answer, leaving a trail of rain on the bookstore floor and a promise that sounded almost like hope. The next morning, the world woke to Ethan Cole's statement. News anchors called it shocking, bold, even foolish, but no one could deny the sincerity in his words. He had admitted everything: the contract, the arrangement, the truth that somewhere along the way, it had become real. Within hours, Cole Media's stock began to fall, and investors demanded an emergency meeting. By noon, Ethan stood before the board, calm and resolved. "If accountability is what the company needs, then you can have it," he said. "I am stepping down as CEO." The room erupted in protest and disbelief, but his voice remained steady. "This company was built to tell stories that matter. Somewhere along the way, I stopped living one. It is time I start again." He left the boardroom without looking back. Cameras followed him as he exited the tower, but he did not hide. For the first time, there was no armor, no facade, just a man walking through the rain, free from everything except the truth. Across the city, Lena watched the press conference replay on a muted television inside the bookstore. Her chest tightened with every word. He had given up everything: his company, his reputation, to defend what they had shared. Tears filled her eyes as she realized what that meant. He had chosen honesty over power. Later that afternoon, a courier arrived at the bookstore carrying a small brown envelope with her name written in Ethan's handwriting. Inside was a single printed invitation to the charity gala they had planned before the scandal. At the bottom, a handwritten note read, "If you still believe in me, meet me there. No cameras. No lies." That night, Lena stood outside the event hall, dressed simply in a navy dress. There were no reporters, no photographers, just a quiet hum of music drifting from inside. When she stepped through the doors, the room was nearly empty except for a few candles and Ethan standing near the stage. He looked different without the suit jacket or the weight of his title. Just Ethan. Just a man. "You came," he said softly, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "You gave me a reason to," she replied. "Why did you ask me here?" He took a deep breath. "Because I wanted you to see what I built this for." He gestured to the banners around the room, each one carrying the name of a scholarship fund for young writers, a program funded by the last of his company's assets. "Cole Media will survive without me, but this is what matters. Stories, truth, second chances. You taught me that." Her throat tightened. "You did not have to give up everything, Ethan." "I did," he said, stepping closer. "Because for the first time in my life, I wanted something that money could not buy." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the folded contract that had started it all. "This was our beginning," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "It nearly ruined us. So I am ending it." He tore the papers in half, letting the pieces fall like snow between them. The sound was quiet, final, freeing. "No more contracts. No more pretending," he said. "Whatever happens next, it will be real." Lena's eyes filled with tears as she looked up at him. "You are still breaking your own rules." "Then maybe that is how I finally start living," he said. And for the first time, neither of them looked away. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The torn pieces of paper lay scattered on the floor, the only reminder of the contract that had once defined them. Ethan's hand trembled slightly as he reached out, unsure, waiting for her to decide. Lena hesitated, then placed her hand in his. The touch was quiet but certain, the first choice made without obligation. "So what now?" she asked softly. "Now," he said, "we start again. No press. No rules. Just us." Months passed, and life began to rebuild itself in ways neither of them had expected. Cole Media recovered under new leadership, and the scholarship foundation Ethan had started grew beyond anything he had imagined. He worked quietly behind the scenes, no longer chasing headlines, only meaning. Lena returned to her writing, her small stories finding a new audience. One morning, she received a package with no return address. Inside was a hardcover book titled Second Chances. On the dedication page were 4 simple words, "For the woman who believed." Tears welled in her eyes as she realized Ethan had published it himself, a collection of essays about leadership, love, and the courage to begin again. Weeks later, the city buzzed with the news of a new art exhibit sponsored by the foundation. The theme was "Letters That Changed Everything." Inside the gallery, surrounded by paintings and photographs, one small glass frame caught her attention. It displayed a printed text message, faded but familiar. It read, "I still believe in you." Lena smiled through her tears. Behind her, a familiar voice said, "That one started it all." She turned. Ethan stood a few steps away, holding a single white rose. He looked at her the way a man looks at something he almost lost but was grateful to find again. "You kept it," she whispered. "I keep what matters," he said. They stood there for a moment, surrounded by quiet applause as people passed by, admiring the story behind the frame. Ethan stepped closer, lowering his voice. "There is one last thing I owe you," he said, pulling something small from his pocket. It was a ring, not the dazzling one from the contract, but a simple gold band. "This time, there is no clause, no conditions. Just a question." He knelt, his voice steady. "Will you marry me? For real?" Lena's eyes filled with tears, but her smile was certain. "Yes," she whispered. "This time, I am sending the message to the right person." The room erupted in gentle applause, though neither of them heard it. Ethan stood, sliding the ring onto her finger. "No contracts," he said. "Only promises." She nodded, her voice trembling with joy. "And stories worth telling." Outside, the city glowed beneath the night sky, alive with the sound of new beginnings. For the first time, there were no lies, no disguises, no performances, only 2 people who had found their way through mistakes, through pride, through love. The wrong number had started everything, but the right choice had finally brought them home.